This podcast is a member of the Red 5 Network. For more Red 5 Network podcasts and content creators, visit bio.link/Red5.
Hey everybody, Jim Cummings here with an important announcement. Are you listening? Good. I have no idea what the hell is going on with these ConverSWations with the fake Onaka and the big, no, we're doing it. It's a tribute. They're going to make me sick. This is Hondo Onaka. Ignore these nimrods.
ConverSWations, you're the one. You make Star Wars lots of fun.
Yeah, you do.
ConverSWations, may the Force be strong with you. Sing it, Bubby.
Doobie-doobie-doo.
Yeah, bub.
Pat and Charles, you're so grand. Never afraid to lend a helping hand.
That's true.
ConverSWations, may the Force be strong with.
Absolutely be strong with.
I see what you did.
Oh, ConverSWations, may the Force be strong with you.
Hello! Welcome to the ConverSWations. I'm Charles.
And I'm Pat, and this is episode 135. The criminal underworld through the galaxy is as deep as it is treacherous. The major crime families and organizations sink their claws deep into these worlds in an effort to expand their influence. You will never find a more wretched hive of scum and syndicates. The Syndicate series, the Hutt Clan.
Oh boy.
Yes, or the Hutt crime family if you prefer, or son of a Hutt.
Yeah, they're also known as the cartel. I mean, this group has like more names than Jabba has chins. It's crazy. Like they just go.
Oh, come on. What about the Levensies? Yeah, so we first hear the Hutts historically in A New Hope when we hear Han mention Jabba, and we first see a Hutt in Return of the Jedi.
Yeah.
That is Jabba Deciligic Tyr. Okay. So
Full name. Yep.
I mean, it's easier just to say Jabba the Hutt because he's the only Jabba, and he's the only Hutt named Jabba. So I feel like Jabba suffices.
Yeah. It's a little bit presumptuous to have to add the Hutt to everything.
Right. Yeah. It's like, come on. He's like, I know I'm a Hutt. I get it. He's on Atkins. It's fine. We see him in the palace, of course, in Jabba's palace.
Mm-hmm.
On Tatooine. Aside from that, we see him in the Phantom Menace at the Buta Eve Classic pod race.
That's right. Yeah.
And throughout the prequel trilogy. But like in places where activities may be less than above board. Okay.
In fact, everything that is not above board.
Correct. So that being said, it wouldn't be surprising to hear that Jabba the Hutt is a crime lord.
Right.
As are all the Hutts. Really.
Exactly. And their base of operations, of course, is Nal Hutta. That's their headquarters there.
This is where their home planet. So
yeah, the Grand Hutt Council is there. And when you think about the structure of the Hutt clan, or like the Syndicate, it's very like Godfather-esque, right? And it's the structure of the families, and then within the families, they have the head of each family as representative on the Grand Hutt Council, and so it's structured. It's almost civilized a little bit, in that sense, where for as good as it works for the clan itself, but the Grand Hutt Council leader is Jabba, of course, and he was the one who was elected to that position, and second to him in influence would be Marlowe. Marlowe the Hutt, I would assume.
Right. Yeah. No. Exactly.
Just in case we weren't sure they were Hutts.
Right. Yeah. Marlowe the Hutt. Which, I mean, I feel like that's kind of like a Marlon Brando type of reference.
Right. It has to be. Absolutely.
Yeah. Come on.
And below them, and now, so Jabba was responsible for treaties and dealings with the outside world. So that's why he's prominently featured, not only just because he's powerful, but he's also in that position of where the councils are approached, and it's him who's the sort of primary speaker for that. And below those positions, then you have the masters of the Hutt clan, and those are like the high profile and influential Hutt leaders of each crime clan family. So there's
Right.
the hierarchy there is interesting. It does play in into the future of of Jabba's, especially Jabba's position. But some of these families and all that kinds of infighting, these levels do come into play throughout their history.
Oh yeah, and and this whole debt to Jabba that Han owes as a main factor to kind of what he does in A New Hope and even throughout the original trilogy. But also, we can't forget in the Clone Wars, the slug
Yeah,
napping of Jabba's infant son, Rhoda the Hutt, becomes a key plot point to the Clone Wars movie.
I don't know about that.
I mean, you fell asleep, but I'm telling you, the slug napping of Jabba's infant son, Rhoda the Hutt, becomes a key plot point to the Clone Wars movie.
Huge part. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
So when you think about it, it's like, you think he's some sort of like outer rim backwater gangster, but they really had a lot of influence throughout the outer rim and throughout the galaxy in general, because they took advantage of hyperspace lanes and trade routes and spice smuggling trade.
Mm-hmm.
So all of that stuff is they kind of have their sweaty palms in all of that.
They really did. And outside of, the Outer Rim territories where, of course, they were the masters, they had their Hutt space and the slice and things like that. But they had clans that were strongly ensconced on different planets. Of course, we know, like we talked about, Tatooine. And they also had a presence on Dandaran and Nar Shaddaa, Slaheran, and Teth as well. So they had these key planets throughout the galaxy that other hives of scum and villainy, you would presume, that would be collecting points for under the table style dealings with the pirates and smugglers and stuff. So, aside from mainly in smuggling, all of the other things that they had dealings in, like you said, is anything basically illegal. And but they're sort of tolerated in certain cases because they did provide certain services.
Let me guess, you could buy their protection.
Right, exactly. So there's, you don't cross them, but they had their purposes. And it certainly made the governing bodies, especially in the Clone Wars with Padme Amidala, she was definitely uncomfortable with that relationship, the tolerant relationship that the Senate and Palpatine, of course, had with the Hutts and some of the dealings that they had with them.
Well, yeah, and again, when you're talking about the Empire, for example, okay, it's a little bit different with the Republic. But with the Empire, it's like you're going to rule people with fear, okay? So if you've got this organization that's already established, that's already kind of ruling with fear, it's like, okay, well, we'll let them do the heavy lifting in this outer rim, and that takes less of our resources. And we still don't have to really worry about people getting out of line, because if they're going to get out of line, it's going to be with the Hutts first, okay, and then we can step in if that's going to be an issue. You know what I mean? So
Right.
It's like, if some bikini clad former princess is going to start anything with anybody, it's going to be the people in charge, which is a space slug, and then we can deal with that, when we deal with it. You know what I mean? When we hear about it. And that's, so the uprising, if there is going to be one, is going to be against the Hutts before it's against the Empire. So it's like, no harm, no foul, because if we find out about it, then we just go in there with some Star Destroyers, like we talked about in our Star Destroyer episode, and just intimidate them or blow them up.
Right. No, absolutely. Yeah. They're as useful as long as you have a need for them. Then is it something they're just going to, get rid of and sweep them under the rug sort of thing.
Right.
Then when we contrast that then to their dealings with the Senate and the Republic during the Clone Wars era, they were looking to, or at least the Galactic Republic was looking to align with them against the CIS at that point.
Right.
And it really did stem around from the fact that because of the Hutt clan's grasp on the Outer Rim, they literally controlled the territory, but also the hyperspace lanes in the area. And that was a key part of that power. So, interestingly,
I do have to point out, I'm pretty impressed with the fact that you're wearing a Tatooine t-shirt right now.
that's pretty cool, isn't it?
I feel like that's deliberate, and I do appreciate it. It hasn't gone unnoticed.
Thank you. It was.
I was going to wear my Jabba the Hutt costume, but it still hasn't been dry cleaned and returned from Rob from the Jedi Temple. So I'll just keep waiting on that one.
Well, your Jabba the Hutt costume from Rob is Rob's sock, basically.
Got that right. Anyway, so continue.
Yeah, so this alliance that was somewhat forming caused a lot of consternation in the Galactic Senate, so much so that Senator Padme Amidala, on behalf of the Senate, started negotiations with the Hutts and Jabba to use their controlled hyperspace lanes.
Right.
At the same time, Dooku, with the help of Zero the Hutt, which is Jabba's uncle, abducted Jabba's son Rhoda in hopes to scuttlebutt, I guess, for Ro, those negotiations with the Republic. And knowing that they'd send Jedi to rescue him, they'd be killed along with Rhoda, and thus taking over the rulership of the clan. So it was a huge power move by Zero the Hutt to try and become that leader of the council, but also get rid of Jabba and Jedi at the same time, which of course matched up with Dooku's dealings and would have been great for him. And of course, and you still have Palpatine playing both sides, right? You've got Darth Sidious, and you've got Palpatine, which of course he just does perfect. At that point, while those negotiations were going on, Jabba promised the Hutt's support and alliance with whoever brought Rhoda back, whether it be the CIS or the Jedi. So it was, for him, it was like, I need to get my kid back, and whoever does it, you got me.
Right. And for those of us who didn't fall asleep in the Clone Wars film, Anakin, Ahsoka, and Obi-Wan did manage to rescue the Huttlet and bring him back to his father. So, yeah, it's everybody knows the Hutts are slimy. Okay?
Right.
Like, not just in appearance, but like in morals. Okay? They got slimy morals. All right. So for someone with high morality, like, or the moral high ground, as I say, with Padme, it's like, yeah, I don't know that we should be dealing with these guys because they're opportunistic. And I feel like this whole like partnership with the Galactic Republic is kind of a front so that they can keep amassing CIS territory while we're in this partnership and keep stretching out their cellulite arm of influence throughout the Outer Rim and beyond, which is exactly what happened.
Right.
So it's like, I don't necessarily trust these guys, so we should probably keep a close watch on them. It was a problem, if we were to go back, because Jabba's 600 years old. He was born in 600 BBY.
Yeah, I mean, there's even mention of Jabba in the High Republic.
And that's where I'm going with this.
Okay, cool. All right, cool.
Yeah. So, obviously the High Republic is, 300 years before everything? Who gives
Right. Somewhere around there,
So what happened is the whole thing is touted with the High Republic that peace and prosperity was spreading throughout the galaxy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I guess all the Jedi were like moral and like keeping tabs on everything, and then keeping, a Starlight Beacon, whatever it is. So like things were sunshine and rainbows,
Right.
Which threatened the Hutt's power. So they did whatever they could to thwart the expansion of the Galactic Republic and retain their slimy boot on the neck of the Outer Rim.
Right. That they did. And so they certainly tried to keep somewhat of a lower profile, especially when it comes to the Jedi, and due to sanctions that were placed on the Hutts because of their types of business dealings,
right?
They weren't necessarily tolerated, but the Hutts, they did come into contact with the Drengir, that dreaded enemy of the Jedi in the High Republic, but also not only them, but also the Nihil.
That's right. So, yeah. So, they had to contend with them, and obviously the Nihil were notorious hyperspace jumping marauders and ransackers of ships. So, not great business for the Hutts and their smuggling operations.
Not at all.
Because as you're trying to smuggle stuff, and these guys, they're not dropping their cargo at the first sign of an Imperial blockade. However, they're just pilfering. You know, they're jumping into the hyperspace lanes and just taking whatever they can, which, these guys don't really have a moral center either. So if they come to a ship that's got a bunch of spice on it, they're going to take that spice.
Mm-hmm. Simple as that.
And then that puts Jabba and his buddies SOL.
Yeah.
Because, what are you going to do? You got no spice.
Right.
So, you're not making any money off it if your inventory's down. Yeah, so their Hutt's empire expanded greatly throughout the Outer Rim during and beyond sort of the tail end of the High Republic.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Right.
And by the time of the Clone Wars, they were one of the most powerful crime families, or even syndicates, in the galaxy.
Oh, that's very true, because that's a very interesting time for them, because not only were they continually trying to expand, their territory and influence and credits, they were trying to play nice with the Galactic Republic because of Rhoda, and then they also trying to control their existing influences from the CIS, not to piss them off to the degree where they're not going to be partners with them, but they're really trying to thread that needle of the balance on the three fronts they're essentially trying to keep things going with. But then, like you said, then in comes the Black Sun and the Pykes, which throws some of those power moves and really does somewhat unsettle the clear standing that the Hutts are just like the be all and end all of the Syndicate world.
Yeah, they were the big dogs on campus, as it were, for a while, for like several hundred years.
Mm-hmm.
And then you got all these other players coming in. So it's a whole thing, because by the time of the Galactic Empire, there were the 5 crime syndicates.
Right.
The Crimson Dawn, the Black Sun, the Pykes, and the Crimora Syndicate.
Right.
So more on Crimson Dawn in episode 107 and the Pykes in episode 125.
Nice.
But, so there's the big 5 now instead of the big 1. So now you got some competition. So, it's getting more cutthroat. And, these guys had influence, but they're not the best physical position.
Right.
Say.
Right.
If you're all sitting around a table, and then some bounty hunter comes in, or some like Sith has-been and his brother come in, it's gonna be a challenge.
Yeah.
Because it's not like you're just gonna run away.
No, absolutely. And in that case too, then you'll just make you look weaker. So,
right.
That was part of the problem, that near the end of the Clone Wars, when Maul, who had taken over the Black Sun Syndicate after Savage had killed the former heads, they came to Nal Hutta and approached the Council as leader of the Shadow Collective, because they wanted to take over Mandalore in a coup. Yeah. And we're not going to talk about why, but anyways, we're just going to skip that entire part. But yeah, it's not a fun thing.
That's the whole thing.
Yeah, it's a whole thing. With that, they promised to spare their lives in the Hutt territories and the hyperspace lanes.
Oh yeah, so this is the ball that Maul had.
Right, yeah, he's just
walks
making these
right
demands.
In there, and he's like, "Listen, come with me." And they're like, "No." He's like, how about we kill most of you, and then anybody who's left, you don't want to be killed, then come with me.
Yeah,
and it worked.
Yeah, so Jabba completely underestimated Maul.
Of course he did. Yeah, so Maul comes in here with his brother, and you got the whole like Hutt senior class sitting around the table, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, okay, well, who are these two guys, and who do they think they are coming into our place, trying to threaten us? We'll squash you like bugs, and then nope, that's not how it goes down.
Right.
So then Savage does his little boomerang lightsaber deal, and that's it. That's all there is to it. these dudes are fried. Then again, you get to the point where it's like, all right, well, we mean business, so you guys going to play ball or what?
Mm-hmm.
And so then that's how they kind of strong arm them into giving them some resources and the green light per se to kind of infringe on their territory and use their resources to, like you said, try and overthrow Mandalore.
Right. And I mean, there was a big battle. Maul and the Shadow Collective.
Yeah.
Jabba had sent bounty hunters and Gamorrean guards against them. And literally, it was like a who's who of scum and villainy. This side of Mos Eisley, there was Maul. There's Pre Vizsla was there. The bounty hunters, Suji. I think she's a female Zabrak.
Yeah.
Which would be a cool cosplay, by the way. I don't think we've ever seen that. Embo was there. Anuba Merrick, Latz Rizzi, and Dengar. These were all people who were fighting against
Dengar. I love Dengar.
Yeah, he's the best. He's so cool. Eric. And by the way, speaking of Mos Eisley, when we were up to see Adesanda this couple of weeks ago, we met while thrifting at one store, and as Star Wife Bernadette typically does, when anybody even hints at Star Wars fandom, she immediately talks about our show. And this one woman who was working at the store, her name is Candace. She works and lives in South Carolina. She went into labor while watching A New Hope back in 2011.
Okay.
TV, probably TNT or something, some sort of marathon.
Sure.
And she named her daughter Eisley, as in Moss Eisley.
Oh, okay.
Well,
all right.
I told her that we'd give her a shout out in the show just for, she gave her some stickers and a business card and I think a pin, whatever. And so she's going to check out the show.
All right. Cool. Okay. Well, and say hi to Eisley for us.
Very cool name. And she usually she said that she gets like, oh, is that like the Eisley brothers? And then she says, no, as in Moss.
And people are like, oh,
whatever.
Oh.
Yeah, so after that huge battle, which of course, they lost, essentially.
Right. Yes.
So Jabba and the bounty hunters retreated to Tatooine, and the collective defeated all the forces and forced Jabba to surrender not only the rank of master of the clan, but also his power on the council.
Right.
And basically, for Jabba, it was like a sort of a hit, because it's pretty much a low point, you'd think, because he underestimated Maul. The rest of the Hutt Council, seeing the decimation that he just laid, they lent a force of Niktos to go and help them overthrow Mandalore. And the Grand Hutt Council really took a hit. Yeah. And they were part of the Shadow Collective while they were helping the Siege of Mandalore. But as soon as that operation was done, the Hutt Collective backed out of the Shadow Collective. So they were in there for like a cup of coffee and that was it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely. It was a commercial break. So, speaking of trade wars and everything, throughout the reign of the Galactic Empire, there were many trade wars. And many of them were due to the Intergalactic Banking Clan.
Oh, yes. Our good old Munes.
Oh, my gosh. What's immune?
What are you immune to?
Oh, yeah, exactly. Flu A and B. So, that being said, one of the trade wars was instigated by an auction of a certain carbonized smuggler.
Oh, man.
Hosted by Kira of Crimson Dawn.
That is crazy. Yep.
And, so this is like in the comics.
Yes.
War of the Bounty Hunters was a multi title crossover event. It was several issues. So it basically alerted Darth Vader to the auction. Mm-hmm. And he didn't get an invite, so he had to crash the party. So this auction's going on, and Jabba wins the auction for Han Solo. Of course, that was like he was going to get Han, right? Yes. And then Han was intercepted. Fett lost him. And then Kira's like, hey, so I got this guy who wants him. And so she goes to profit off it. And Jabba wins it again. So Fett gets him back to bring him to Jabba.
Deliver him to Jabba.
Right. Again, like 2 strikes so far. And so that's when Vader comes in, and the Imperial forces killed all the members of the Grand Hutt Council who were present at the time.
Yeah.
Okay? Which led to a battle that ultimately left only Jabba to lead the family. Okay? And Vader left to deal, because it's after, obviously after Bespin, after Han's been carbonized.
Right.
So Vader left to deal with Skywalker in Cloud City. So this is like right after Han gets carbonized. Kira's like, we're going to steal him and profit off of this. So this all stuff goes down. Vader leaves to go deal with Luke. And once Luke took the dive of destiny, the Emperor ordered Vader to return to Jakara to put an end to this conflict betwixt the Hutts and the Galactic Empire, because they're still fighting for what's going on with Han.
Like, it's becoming a distraction.
Yes. So the Emperor's like, don't worry. Like, Luke jumped to his death in the thing. Go back and put this fire out. So he goes back for that. So like I said, Jabba had previously won the auction. And after that whole kerfuffle, he hung his trophy in his palace on Tatooine.
Right. Oh
So like, it wasn't just like, hey, Fett's loading him into to Slave One and go straight to Jabba's. Like, this whole mess happens in the meantime.
Right. Boba pulls into a Wawa to pick up a hoagie. He loses Han and all heck breaks out.
Right.
Another thing that was cool too about that whole Jakara thing was that Vader had actually battled Kira for a little bit.
Yeah.
And he recognized her fighting style from Maul, which is kind of cool.
Yes.
Okay, so before we get to further details in the Galactic Empire, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back.
This week on Storage Wars Tatooine, a dispute erupts over ownership of a particular unit, but the Huttese auctioneer steps in and tries to settle it. What's going on here? This is my unit. I paid for this up front for 3 months, and you're here trying to auction it off? I store all of my Boilermakers here. Do you know how much it takes to make a particular brand of Jedi mind-bending liquids? This is ridiculous! Tune in tomorrow to Holo Channel 7 to find out if the rightful owner keeps what rightfully is his. Maybe.
And we're back. Thank you to our sponsors. Yeah, so just before the break, we were gotten to the auction of Frozen Han and touch upon the Galactic Empire era dealings that the Hutts had with not just the other syndicates, but also the Empire itself. And I find it really interesting, too, that during that period where Jabba was, like I said, at his pretty much his low point, because the Grand Hutt Council had exited the Shadow Collective and just sort of like hanging back and doing his thing, or doing their thing, Jabba was still, obviously he was on Tatooine, still making his money. He still had the influence because of, like you said before the break, he's been around doing this for 600 years. He's learned a lot and knows how to stay alive. Like, that's never been anything that, was in question. So he still had all of his business dealings, and obviously like with Han, he was a smuggler, and all these little small jobs add up. But the Hutt clan in general became a sort of special partner with the Empire. So they allowed them to use their space, and in return, the Hutts were granted special privileges, such as being allowed to break galactic law, for example, and do this smuggling. So again, it was another example of the powers that be casting a blind eye to what they were doing, as long as they had a purpose.
Right.
But while those things were in play, the other families, of course, got jealous, and because he was getting preferential treatment. But this shows Jabba's staying power. He knew how to work a room, I guess, for lack of a better term. and was able to retain some of his local power on Tatooine and still, make a living for himself.
Oh yeah, quite a bit of influence still.
Right. And then so even as the Empire sort of closed things down and tried to keep things more on keel, he started collecting moisture tax from the farmers on Tatooine.
Mm-hmm.
And so every
obviously
possible area of making money, they did,
Yeah, you know what? If there is a price to pay for anything, they're going to find it and exploit it because that's what they do.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that Jabba was smuggling outside of the Hutt clan operations? You know what I mean? Like on the side? Like, for example, when Han dropped the cargo after being boarded by Imperials, even though there was a supposed agreement with the Imperials that they were allowed to do that. So if Han had said, look, I'm doing this for Jabba, he wouldn't have had to drop it. Or do you think that was like something off the books?
Yeah, it definitely was something that was not sanctioned by the Empire.
Okay.
I think there are certain things that kind of got swept under the rug. There were some things that were maybe too big to ignore or to okay in the grand scheme of things. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like some illegal stuff was less problematic than others. But yeah, certainly I feel like smuggling spice maybe is maybe a no-no. Like hurting nerfs and stuff like that. Yeah, sure. Maybe weapons dealing, things like that. So, that's all stuff that they could maybe the Empire could kind of turn a bit of a blind eye to. But I think spice was definitely a no-no.
Okay.
So I think it's profitable to be sure. That was definitely not above board. That was definitely not something that the Empire would have been cool with. But I think the Hutt clan was very active in it, not just like Jabba on the side. I think there were certainly things that the clan did that was still illegal and not like overlooked. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. And for that matter, I couldn't see anywhere where the Grand Hutt Council had made any overtures to bringing Jabba back into the council. So it seemed very sort of two streams, right? Where the Empire was dealing with the council, but also Jabba in a certain sense, because they knew of him and they tolerated what he was doing in that little backwater planet called Tatooine, like they didn't really care because it didn't really affect in general the larger workings. But after the destruction of Death Star 1, that's where Palpatine was like, okay, I need to start cleaning this stuff up, for as much as possible, especially with the larger cartels, including the Hutts.
Oh, yeah.
There's a story in one of the comic books that talked about the destruction of the weapons factory Alpha on Simoon 1, where the Emperor sent Vader to negotiate with Jabba directly to keep raw resources for the Empire's weapons needs, which is really impressive. And it does show, again, like you had said before, Vader and Palpatine, in this case, both knew that Jabba still had that kind of influence and therefore spoke to him directly. And this is where Vader had acquired Fett's services to find out who was a little dirtbag who did that trench and destroyed the Death Star. Yeah. And really cool little side story that Jabba was directly involved with, which I didn't really know. And of course, like you said, there's a lot of cool stuff going on in the comic books for sure.
Yeah, and like I said, the War of the Bounty Hunter, like sort of crossover event thing. Obviously, the Hutts have several dealings with bounty hunters, as the Empire. So there were some sort of organic links there between the two. So to explore that on the pages was really a cool thing.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And there was a lot of local control and influence that he had up until he had died. Tatooine, for being a backwater planet, there's a bright center of the universe. It's the planet's farthest from. It's really not a whole lot going on in general. And then you've got like the towns where you would have Mos Eisley.
Yeah.
And then like Mos Espa and stuff where like the major stuff happens. But then you go to Jabba's palace and that's a happening place.
It really is. And that like sets up perfectly Return of the Jedi, right? Where we really get our first sights on Jabba and the bounty hunters hanging around.
Yeah, absolutely.
And after that whole story about the Han and Carbonite auction and that fiasco, there he's like leaning up against the wall, and he's his prized possession, because Han Solo, not only did he put a price on his head after he dropped that shipment, when he found out that he joined the rebels, he he made the bounty on his head even more. So it was really his trophy. And of course, as we see in Return of the Jedi, the rebels come to get and free Han.
Mm-hmm.
This is where his story ends after an illustrious close to 700-year span.
Yeah, like I said, he had ruled over the Hutt crime family until his death in 4 ABY at the hands of the Hutt Slayer, which is such a cool name. Like, it's like something from Game of Thrones.
It really
Hutt
is.
Slayer.
It's so cool.
He's cool. But the remaining Hutts comb the sail barge wreckage to find the cause of death, and in doing so, they put out a bounty on Leia.
Oh, that's cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah, so
it makes sense.
Yeah, definitely, because you got the person who killed your cousin, your boss, leader, and all this. It's like, yeah, well, we're gonna exact our revenge, which of course didn't happen. Just because with their organization kind of being strangled, as it were, the Hutt clan began to deteriorate, and it really lost its grip on the power it long held in the Outer Rim, because Jabba was gone, and he was kind of the glue to the whole thing. So there were other Hutts that were still around, but a lot of like their enforcers and the people that they had on their payroll began to seek employment elsewhere. So, they really lost their grip on the Outer Rim, and even by 21 ABY, many of the hired mercs that they previously employed moved on to more prosperous gigs. Okay, like working for Ochi of Bastoon. And in fact, when Luke and Lando were in their post-Return of the Jedi escapades, Luke made a comment like, I feel like these are a bunch of Jabba's old guys. Like they must have moved on, because Jabba's not around anymore. And the Hutt cartel has kind of waned quite a bit. So Jabba's cousins, the twins, seek to lay claim to Jabba's Tatooine territory after his death, but they heard of someone filling Jabba's vacated throne. So, of course, they sent Chrysanthemum to kill Boba Fett. And when the Wookiee bounty hunter was unable to complete the task, they came from Nal Hutta to see this new usurper who sat on Jabba's throne and apologize for sending Chrysanthemum after him, and offered him a Rancor and Chrysanthemum to kind of seal the apology. So it was like, listen, we sent that guy after you, and he didn't succeed, so we're sorry. It's like, no, you're not. If he succeeded, you would have been just fine with what you did. So, of course, they're like, we got to sweeten the deal and bring a Rancor.
Yeah.
And Danny Trejo, apparently.
And Danny Trejo.
Right. Yeah, so that's
deal.
Exactly. That's what they had to do. So they get to Tatooine, and they do all this, but then they also find out that Jabba's territory had been turned over to the Pykes. And they were like, we're not trying to get into a turf war with the Pykes. So they cut their losses and hightailed it out of Tatooine back to Nal Hutta.
Yeah, and they formally abandoned. They said, like, we are done with Tatooine. No more. We are done.
Yeah. So we kind of see glimpses of this in the Book of Boba Fett, but that's kind of the more explained version of why they came, give him a Rancor and a Wookiee, and then just like peace out, because like it doesn't make a lot of sense. But when you learn that aspect of it, it's like, yeah, that makes a lot more sense.
Yeah.
At this point, it can kind of be assumed that the Hutts, the twins, are all that remain of the Hutt clan.
Yeah.
Chronologically, we see them return to Nal Hutta, and they retain some sense of control over something, I guess. But perhaps there'll be some more fleshed out future of the Hutts in more projects. But that's kind of where the Hutt Empire last has any sort of documented history in any sort of media.
Yeah, the upcoming stories that we're seeing chronologically would be behind this, but yeah, it'd be interesting to see if there's more story added to that. I often wondered, had the twins sent Chrysanthemum to kill the daimyo who was sitting on the throne. If it had been Bib Fortuna before Fett had killed him, how would that story have gone? Quickly Bib would have been taken down by Chrysanthemum.
Oh yeah. Oh, that would have been a disaster for him. It would have been entertaining. I feel though the new daimyo could have met a similar fate, and I would be less annoyed. But yeah. So yeah, that's kind of the long several centuries reign of the Hutt cartel, kind of dwindling down to a couple of nobodies on Nalhutta.
Right. Yeah, and with no influence.
All right.
Back to selling secondhand cars or something or whatever. Like it's just how the mighty have fallen.
Counterfeit death sticks.
I have a trivia question for you.
Well, I have a trivia answer. It's probably not correct at this point.
So, as we spoke about Zero, the Hutt, Jabba's uncle, do you know who killed Zero ultimately?
Who killed Zero?
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh.
Because obviously Jabba knew that, and Zero did eventually sort of pay a price.
I feel like he was killed by Cad Bane.
No. Surprisingly, from what I read, it was Cy Snoodles.
Oh yeah. Yeah. That's
crazy.
She's a lounge singer and also a deadly assassin.
That is crazy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I did remember reading that, which is like the weirdest thing.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, I want hollow footage of that because I feel like that's like Hutt Slayer 2.0 right there. Oh boy, what a mess! Size noodles, so weird.
Of all characters,
I know. Like really. Well, and then she gets relegated in the special editions to like some backup singer.
Yeah.
Come on. To that dude with all that saliva. Come on. Anyway.
Yeah.
Oh boy. I mean, there was a lot of interesting looking Hutts in the Clone Wars for sure.
Yes. Colors and sizes and everything.
Yes. Different markings and the whole bit. Different hairstyles. That one guy had like a crew cut. I was like, all right, man.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
Oh boy. But so we're slowly but surely rounding out our syndicates.
Yeah.
With the Hutts here, which are sort of the OG syndicate.
Exactly. A lot of screen time. Original trilogies, obviously a lot of the cartoons, like sort of like, the animated series of the Clone Wars and all that stuff really fleshed out the other ones, of course. But the Hutt clan really was front and center in the filmed story, which is kind of cool.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Which, again, you took 5 or 6 puppeteers to,
I think it was 6.
Yeah. So to do a room full of Hutts, like you saw in the Clone Wars in live action would have been a huge undertaking.
Yeah.
So really to get to see that sort of thing in animation was really the only way they could do it at the time, which it's great because you get to see the sort of inner workings of their syndicate, which is so that's the Hutts.
That's the Hutts.
I guess great. So
oh boy.
We're all over the socials and the internets. However, the very best place to find us is on our very own website at ConverSWations.com, Facebook.com/ConverSWations, Twitter, X, or whatever is at Swations. Insta's at ConverSWations. We're on Threads at ConverSWations there, and ConverSWations on Etsy. A little bit of a kerfuffle there, but that seems to be all cleared up. We're all fine here now. So, and also we're on Linktree at link.tree/ConverSWations for more links and for more wonderful members of the Red 5 Podcast Network, of which we're proud founding members.
Right.
bio.link/Red5 or whatever. So those are those. I think that's the first time Ewan's done the socials, which is pretty cool.
It is, yeah. So, it's the first.
I think it's great. So, Yeah, no, I guess the only thing left to do is Mongo Bagon Wachi Kospa O Pichaka Wanchi Kulpatang Mitu Chunky Twa Chisa Picha Wanki Chubaka Conchita Dwa Upakurata Kap Pawipa Ki Isa Chonkawa Wuki.
Greetings, listener. Just a reminder that the podcast you just heard is a proud member of the Red 5 Network family. Red 5 Network offers you a great variety of shows you'll be sure to love. So the next time you're itching for quality content, make sure you head over to Red 5 Network. You'll find this podcast along with a whole lot more. All wings report in. It's the Red 5 Network.